Hello and welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you can be with us on this Transformation Thursday. So, this has been going on now for a couple of months, and this is the August panel. We're going to be talking about little things that make a big difference, particularly if you're on homeschooling or self-schooling or an autodidact in some way. I love that word, how it can sometimes be really beneficial to have outside support. And we have three panelists with us today. I'll be introducing them and we'll be asking them some questions. And as we go along, feel free to send in the chat any questions that come up for you. Now, the last 15 minutes, we'll have plenty of time for questions. And if you have a particular question or follow-up thought for a particular panel person, just let us know in the chat. And before we start too, I really want to acknowledge and thank Laurel Springs School for putting on these events. I just feel like we're all just so hungry for this interaction, these personal interactions with real people and real experts. And I've worked with Laurel Springs for 25 years. I was formerly the creator and CEO of Homeschool.com. So I worked with Laurel Springs for 25 years. I worked with a lot of curriculum providers, and Laurel Springs School was it was top shelf. It was the gold standard when it came to curriculums and online experiences. And for one of the reasons, it's because they have a beautiful structure. What my daughter would say, the sides of the sandbox that gives that structure. And then within that, they have flexibility, personalization. Your education is customized for your interest. That's one of the reasons why Laurel Springs School is the choice for young Olympic athletes and movie and TV stars. They have quite a roster of names that you would recognize who choose to use Laurel Springs for their education. Also, you'll probably find that this homeschooling and online schooling is very fast. I homeschooled all three of my children, and my oldest daughter ended up going to the London School of Economics. So proof is in the pudding. She makes it look really good. And I have a special needs son who was legally blind and on the Asperger's, and it worked really well for him too. So I'm so glad that you are here. Now, if you see the chat thing, if you're online, and I also want to welcome people listening to the recording, but for those of you who are live, put in the chat and let me know where you are located. For example, in our panelists, we just found out that many of us are from the Portland, Oregon area. We were really surprised for that. And our youngest panelist is in the Nashville area, and another one of our panelists is in New York. And Laurel Springs School, of course, is physically located in Ojai, California. So we are so glad to be doing this. Well, I would love it if you could open up the chat. I'd love to hear where you are from. You can write that anytime. Thank you. Okay, Seattle area. Lisa, yes, Portland, you're just 3 hours away from me. Virginia, West Tennessee, Lil in California. One of the little things that we'll be talking about in the panel today, Brooklyn, New York, is that every state has different education requirements. China, well, Sarah, that's coming in with the sexiest location. Welcome. I can only imagine what time it is for you there. But yeah, so one of the little things is by having an outside partner sometimes is that they know the rules for each state. And we're going to be talking a little bit today too about accredited versus non-accredited. So our panelists know about that as well. Excellent. Hey, I'd love it in the chat too if you would let us know, are you currently homeschooling? Do you consider yourself to be a homeschooler? Are you an online learner? What kind of do you call yourself? And I'd also love to hear too, what is bringing you to this panel, because our time is so precious and so honoring that you've come here today. What is bringing you here to this event, especially from China? I can only imagine the time change, and in the East Coast. Yes, I think I see you typing. Yeah, are you homeschooling currently? Are you an online student? What are you hoping to learn? What's bringing you here? And we'll be able to come back to that as well. Okay, so we're going to start out. Our first panelist is Everett Elkins. Hi, Everett. Everett is currently a student at Laurel Springs School. He's a competitive swimmer. He is doing something that's actually quite common in homeschooling and online learning, is that they are able to finish their high school educations early. That's because of dual enrollment, and also because there is so much more on-task time. In other words, you're not losing time passing out papers or with discipline issues. So, Everett, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, and let us know if there are any little things you experienced that have made a big difference for you.
Sure. So, hello, everybody. My name is Everett Elkins. Like Miss Rebecca said, I am from West Tennessee area. Some things about me. I am 14 years old this year, and I am graduating from Laurel Springs with a full accredited diploma, as well as over 30 college credits from different universities around the United States. I'm also a competitive USA swimmer. I try to focus more on my academics, but I gotta have that stress reliever sometimes. So some of the small things I would say that like online school helps with is the ease of being able to get plugged into programs. I think me and Miss Rebecca were talking about this and discussing how in my in my education, I'm able to get into programs that I would have to compete for so much more difficultly in brick and mortar school. So, for example, I was able to participate in the Future City program presented by Discover E. It's a huge engineering international program, and me and my team were able to place top 5. And I don't think I'd be able to have that program and that accessibility to all those different ways to get plugged into my school if I was at a brick and mortar, because only then I'm competing with so many different people. Just at that online school, at that very holistic level, I think I've been given so many more opportunities. Even though it's small, it's just huge at the same time.
How old were you when you joined Laurel Springs? Did you come from public school or from homeschooling or from something else?
So I've been online schooling since kindergarten, actually. I did pre-K in brick and mortar and then started online schooling in around kindergarten, first grade. I tried many different programs. I went through a program called Abeka Academy where I watched videos and then did paper homework, and then my mom created them. I did academies called Monarch Academy, Ignite Academy. I did many different programs until I landed on LSS. I think I started LSS around 8 years old or 9 years old. I've been at it for 6 years now, so whatever that math it turns out to be. So I've been in the business a long time.
So you're 14 years old, you're graduating with an accredited diploma, you've been accepted to Embry-Riddle to be an aeronautical engineer. So now at 14, are you going to be physically going to the campus? And,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that?
So I will be physically going to the campus. Daytona Beach, can not wait. Super excited. Um, as I feel about that, I don't know. I think online school really prepared me. There's obviously that sense of nervousness that any person would have going to college, going away, like all that. But I feel like online school prepared me differently than a brick and mortar would. So brick and mortar, you have that teacher over your shoulder saying, okay, you need to do that assignment, you need to do that assignment. But in online school, I was said, get all your assignments done by the end of the semester, have fun. And so I had to learn how to self manage myself. And I think that's a skill that I will carry into college that a lot of students wouldn't, that don't do non traditional schooling, just because I'm able to say, okay, I can't go hang out with that friend because I have that physics test. I can't go do that because I have that. But also being able to say, oh, wait, no, I can do that at home after I go spend quality time with friends. So I think online school prepared me extremely well, which makes me feel not as nervous as I would if I was in brick and mortar.
I really agree with that. I noticed that as well, that people, if they're online schooling or homeschooling, they self-manage themselves. Whereas somebody who's in a school, they kind of grow up always looking for the teacher to tell them what to do, or they're really trying to kind of skirt around the system.
Yes,
You know?
yes, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. What else are some of the little things that have been a benefit by having someone else? I really wish I should be talking to your mother because she would probably say, "Oh my gosh, this is why we did this." Do you know some of her story? What brought you to Laurel Springs, to the online homeschooling, and what are some of those benefits?
Yes. So first off, funny enough, my mom is actually in the audience. But I think all the different programs, there was always a certain point in time when we realized I wasn't fitting in with them. And with online school, there's so many different programs you can pick. So back at Academy, no matter how much work I was given, I would sometimes still fall asleep during my videos and then do my homework correctly. So it was like, okay, obviously that's not challenging me. So I need to go to something more challenging. And so I got moved from that program into Monarch Academy. And in Monarch Academy, I was doing really well, and then it took me about 3 weeks, and then I started finishing school at 10 AM, and I don't know how you guys see it, but a 6-year-old boy finishing school at 10 AM and then running around the house all day is probably not in a lot of the adults' best interest. So it was like, okay, he obviously needs something more challenging, he needs to get plugged into something. So that's when I started Ignite Academy. Ignite Academy was the first program where I had teachers physically grading my work, like I submitted my work online, very similar to Laurel Springs, and then had it graded. So Ignite Academy did take me longer, but there was no community engagement. I was not forced to go out and actually participate in the community. Um, I'm autistic, so that is something that's really important, is that I be thrown in. I need to be able to go in and say, okay, I need to be plugged into this community because only then I can't prepare myself for college. Because in college, I can't just hide behind a computer screen all the time. I have to physically go participate with people. So Ignite Academy worked a while, and then again, it was the same thing. I started finishing around 10 or 11. I wasn't getting plugged into the community, and it just I needed something more. I need something to push me further. And so that's when I started in Laurel Springs. And I remember I got to Laurel Springs and I think the first day I was doing school for maybe 8 or 9 hours because it's just how like it really challenged me to think, but that was good because it's like giving your brain a workout. It's like the more you work out your brain, the stronger it gets. So like I just needed to constantly be challenged. And once I was there, then I was able to get plugged into a community. And I've made some of my best friends at Laurel Springs, like lifelong friends, and met them in person just through the program. So I think over time it was okay, this program's not working. This is good, but I need something better. So just continuously pushing through is really how my parents picked which program to that would work best for me.
That's one of the differences with Laurel Springs is that they have these in-person events like prom and graduation. And it's so funny is that when people think about homeschooling, high school, they go, but what about prom? You know, as
Yes.
we sometimes we think it's a bigger deal than it is. Yeah, last question for you, Everett. You mentioned that you're a competitive swimmer. How were you able to do that if you were not going to a brick and mortar school?
So it's actually not as complicated as a lot of people will see it as because in competitive swimming, there's usually 3 to 4 different leagues depending on where you are in the area. So there is the USA Swimming League, which is that's a league that they select Olympians from. So like all those meets that you see whenever the Olympians are competing to be able to represent the United States of America, those are USA events. So USA Gymnastics, USA Basketball, USA Swimming. And so in USA Swimming, um, there's clubs, but you can go to different schools. So I found a local club in my area and said, "Hey, I'd like to swim." And it was sure because I don't swim for Little Springs. I swim for Covington Manta Rays. That's my team. So I'm able to go forth and find a better swim program if I needed to. And I'm still able to say, I go to a different school, but that's fine because I'm just able to go. I'm able to drive to the swim program and I don't have to worry about getting out of school early enough because it's like, oh, okay, I can just go swim whenever I need to swim. So if there's 6 a.m. practices or if there's middle of the day practices, I can still go because I go to an online school. So it's a little thing that allows me to have so much more flexibility and focus on my athletics as well.
that's the truth too, that because of budget cuts, a lot of the brick and mortar schools don't have the programs. And soccer and swimming, they're community programs. Soccer, baseball, basketball, they're community programs, and they draw athletes from various schools. So that's kind of something you don't have to be afraid of. Well, Everett, thank you very much for that. And
Yeah.
audience, if you have any particular questions, or send Everett your good wishes as he goes off to college, please type it in the chat and we'll pass that on. And next, I want to introduce you to our second panelist. Her name is Tiffany Soria. She is with Novel Education Group. And Tiffany is very interesting that she has a lot of very famous clients, and they will go to Novel Education Group and say something like, we're going on, a year, a world schooling a year, or we're going to be on a yacht for a year, or we're even staying home. And then they'll be looking for a private teacher. Because one of the things I love about our education, particularly in the United States, is that we have so many options. And, Tiffany represents kind of an option here as well. So Tiffany, can you tell us a little bit about your work, and particularly how some of the little things, that make a difference in the style of learning that you kind of help people with?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Tiffany Soria, as Rebecca said, and I founded Novel Education Group back in 2014. So it's been a long time. I've been working with Laurel Springs since before 2014. It's been so great to watch the school grow. And I think that seeing, just with sort of the amount of students that we've worked with throughout the years, and seeing how the school has consistently been able to meet the needs of students is because of the little things. In terms of what we do, so we provide both accredited and non-accredited customized schooling, homeschooling options. So talking to families about what option works best for them, the reason why they would choose an accredited program is because of just like you were saying about the whole, I thought the sandbox analogy was really great. It's just providing sort of like a backbone for any student, but with the flexibility and even the creativity that students are looking for. So when we're speaking to a family that's looking for, okay, so, we're traveling for 6 months, or not even that. I mean, yes, obviously we have worked with some really high profile clients, but aside from that as well, families that, more and more families that we're seeing that where maybe staying in one place for 10 months just doesn't really fit their lifestyle. Or just are a lot of our students who aren't thriving in a traditional school setting. Having the backbone of an accredited school does so much. Laurel Springs has helped. We work with students that have gone to Laurel Springs. Like we've had one student that literally completed 2 school years in 1 calendar year, all the way to the other end of the spectrum with students who experience, really severe bullying in their current school. So bad that they've literally, it's hindered their ability and their capability to speak. So the fact that one thing can work for both, it's because of the little things like the backbone and the structure that allow students with really any type of situation to be able to succeed.
Yeah, sometimes it is those little things. And I was thinking too, sometimes, for homeschoolers, I love it so much, but it isn't always easy.
Right.
And sometimes it's having somebody beside you to say, have you done your homework, without the parent having to be the parent and the teacher at the same time.
Mhm.
or having help with the challenging subjects. Because with online schools, you can do it full time, or you can sometimes pick different parts of it.
Yep.
You can do the chemistry or the higher maths or the foreign language. But if you're a family of artists, you can do that. So tell us, what are some of the reasons why families have come to you? Like, what are some of the cool things that they're doing that might inspire us? Some of the reasons why they are taking their child out of a brick and mortar school. What are some of the neat things they're doing?
So we work with a lot of families that, one really cool thing is that an accredited online school allows international families to have access to American education, and that's a huge part of it. We actually have a really large student roster in the Middle East. And they have access to schools. They have access to, sort of this type of schooling because of schools like Laurel Springs. So there's that type of client. There's also the type of client that, for example, we have one student who their family decided to travel the world for a year. And they gave us basically a list of all the countries that they're visiting over the course of 9 months, right? But the fear is, okay, so this all sounds great. We're going to travel for 9 months, yes, but how am I knowing? How do I know that my child is going to stay on track? Can we also dive into the specifics and the history and the culture of all the countries that we're visiting, but also make sure that we're not steering too far away from a standardized education, so that when they go back to school for 9th grade, 10th grade, whatever it may be, they're not completely lost sort of in this, they haven't just completely stepped away. Online school it gives them the opportunity to make sure that they've done that. It sort of keeps them in track so they can have their own, they can go off on, we can supplement with sort of an extra history lesson or an extra English book, while also making sure that they're staying in the right lane as well. So the traveling families, also, exactly, we worked with a lot of young actresses, an opera singer. I mean, really, these students are doing really, really cool things. And I think with the peace of mind of knowing that they're really like crossing their T's and dotting their I's with school, and that's taken care of, it gives them the freedom to be able to explore the other parts. So that's great to be able to provide that.
So does a family come to you, they tell you a little bit about, their child's interests and needs, and then you help them find the curriculum or the setting that will work best for them?
Exactly. So my first question when I speak to a family is always, what's going on in your schooling situation, and tell me what your ideal schooling environment is. That's always what I ask them. Like, ideally, what if you could create your perfect school day in your perfect school situation, what would that look like for you? And what role does education play in your life? That's always big questions that we ask. And then they'll usually say, so in our perfect world, my daughter is able to ski in the mornings or go horseback riding in the mornings, start school at maybe 1 p.m., have like that focused time of work, and then we have proper family time in the evenings. That's just one example, but something like that, a regular school wouldn't, brick and mortar wouldn't work for. So it's really sort of how it's almost a lifestyle choice as well. It's how they envision their lives and how can they make sure that they're getting a high standard of education, while also being able to really live that ideal lifestyle with their families that they would like. So once we get an idea of what that looks like, pointing them in the direction of whether accredited schooling would work or if customized schooling would work. But online school really, really does provide that sort of It's really that peace of mind, just knowing, yes, I know at the very least, I'm doing what my peers are doing, but there's so much more room to do more. Whereas in regular school, there's not a lot of room to do more.
Do you find you're having an increase in the number of special needs students coming to you?
Yes, definitely. A big increase in definitely with kids with Asperger's, dyslexia. A lot of schools don't have the resources, I feel like, to tend to the personalized needs of each student. But the thing is that every student is capable of doing the curriculum. It's not an issue of them being able to do the actual work. It's just the method in which these things are taught. It's the message. It's the time in which you need to process the information. And online school gives you that time, and it gives you the flexibility to be able, without the pressure of being in the in-person classroom. I mean, like, for one of our students who literally has a difficult time speaking, students who don't participate in class or don't raise their hand enough can sometimes be graded down. And that's not an issue that you would have to deal with if you're in online school. And why should that student be graded down because of, some like a neurodivergent issue that's happening? So we're definitely seeing an increase in students with special needs, students with learning differences. And again, the fact that that one type of curriculum can work for students with and without is, I think, like a test. It's to the fact that this works because it is providing one common thing for all of them.
A little thing that people don't think about is that with customized education, one of the big benefits is that students learn different subjects at different speeds. Everett can probably attest to this, that in some areas, since you're able to work at your own pace, you can go fast through the subjects that are easy for you, and you can take the extra time on the subjects that are challenging for you, and this results in mastery learning. I think that's a big difference with this personalized learning. It's that it's mastery learning. You get to master these different subjects and go in richer for them. I feel like that's a really huge benefit. I believe it is the future. We're going to talk more about that in the May panel, but this customized education, this is the future. We're able to do that. All education now is becoming online education because of AI and because of technology in the classroom, and finding that balance, that intersection between making it personal and customized for each student. I'm looking forward to that, with caution as well. But I believe we're going to see some big benefits for that.
I agree.
Yeah. Tiffany, thank you so much. So our third panelist batting cleanup for us today is Stephanie Palazzolo. Palazzolo, her nice Italian name. So my name is Kokender for Stephanie, so I feel your pain. Can you pronounce your name for us? Oh, and I think you need to be unmuted, please.
That would help. Everybody's like waiting to hear the last name now, right? Now it has
Stephanie
too much of a build-up.
And with My Homeschool Expert. By the way, I love the name My Homeschool Expert. So can you tell us a little bit about your expertise, and particularly kind of focusing on this topic of how you help families find those little things or those online partners who can help them make their homeschooling or their self-schooling easier, richer, better, and hopefully higher quality as well. So welcome.
Thank you so much. So if I had to say there's like a twofold answer here, right? So part of the expertise started actually with how to be in compliance with your state's laws. So this was where, when I first started the company, this is where we saw the need. It's something that's, as I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are definitely going to nod their head right now, it is extremely difficult to understand and to garner the information needed online by yourself. And, a lot of people are not used to education jargon, law jargon. And so when you mix those two things together, it's difficult sometimes, but it doesn't need to be. And it's really, in the big scope, it's not. And so there was like a really big need that we saw to just straight help parents weed through all the language and just, how do I homeschool? Being in compliance with my state and district. And then, so that's the whole, paperwork side and due dates or reports or whatever we're doing. And there's a huge need there. But then the other side of this is the fun side. And that's, no, now what do I do every day? And it's super similar to Tiffany, where it's matching a family up with an expert that's going to be best fit for them and what they see as their ideal homeschool journey. Because, just to reiterate, but I think it's a good point to reiterate, there's so many options now. And one great thing is that whatever your homeschool journey is, you can kind of make it happen. Even if it looks a little different as you're learning things and as you're going and seeing what's going to be an actual fit. The downside, I would say, is decision paralysis at this point, because there are so many things. And it's become such a thing and such a trend and so much less taboo that there's things popping up every day. And so helping families weed through all of that and, go with places that are already vetted and things that are already like tried and true, and keeping up with, modern asks is part of what we do also.
Stephanie, do you see a difference now after COVID? Because you've been doing this for a while. So has this homeschooling changed after we had global homeschooling? Do you see some differences?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people realized that this is actually a doable thing, and a lot more common. And then the more people that thought that, it just became more common. I use the word taboo because, before COVID, as those of us that have been, in this arena for a while, it was certain families homeschooled, or, the elite homeschooled for their reasons, and medical, sports, and national athlete. There was those specific
Spiritual.
reasons. And now it's so much more widespread and all across the board. And it's like we were given the opportunity as a society to see that this is something that anybody could do, and that there's different avenues that could maybe fit better than the one size fits all approach that we were all kind of just used to, for lack of, more understanding of what else was out there. So, not many good things came out of COVID, but one of them was the understanding that school and even work, can be done a little bit differently.
Yeah. I remember when they were homeschooling, part of me was kind of sad because I loved homeschooling so much, but there were families that hated it so much.
Mhm.
They hated it so much. They didn't have a choice. It was thrust on them, and
Yeah.
there wasn't the customization and flexibility that we're all talking about
Yeah,
here.
totally different.
Where
Mhm.
you're changing, and said you were just hammering a square peg into that round hole.
Yeah.
So I kept trying to sing it to them, like, it doesn't have to be this way. This
Yeah,
is
or
just
that's
kind
not
of
homeschooling.
temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had that too. We have a lot of family, we get phone calls every day from all over the country in all different situations. And some people will say things like, we did homeschooling before and it wasn't a good fit. And I'm like, wait a sec, did you do homeschooling or did you do like forced remote schooling for a period of time? Because that's not what this is going to be. And we could make this something that's going to fit your family very well if this is the route, you're looking to go. So showing people that, those two things are different too.
Yeah. What do you think is maybe the biggest little thing that has made the biggest difference?
I think I said decision paralysis before, but Everett was talking about this too. There's there's so many different things that can be like sprinkled into a homeschool plan at this point, that it's like whatever you want your journey to look like. Tiffany said this. Look, we are all on the same page. Whatever you want your homeschool journey to look like, it can happen. And so what we do, like the little things are, let's get you in compliance. Let's start building something for you that's going to be either as structured or unstructured as you're looking for, accredited, not, whatever it may be. And then we call them the big rocks. And then we have all the little pebbles. And it's like, okay, what makes your child happy? What's going to be flexible for your family? What are some little things that we could add in here to like pad your week or your month, to make it partly academic, partly social, partly athletic, whatever you are going to want your child to do and your child is going to want to do. That's the fun part.
Oh, that's great. We just had a question in the chat that's just excellent. So I'm going to ask that to all three of you. So Stephanie, if you don't mind, let me start with you. And we're talking about the lost years during COVID. And it's like, it wasn't just the local brick and mortar schools, but the students lost a lot, during those years of COVID. And what's happening now? Is there some benefit? In other words, is this type of learning that we're talking about now, is that going to help? And, Tiffany, Everest, and Stephanie, has that been your experience as well, that the students you're seeing are, I don't hate to use this phrase, but way behind than where they were before? Or, the experience was different because that was a big pebble in the pond that affected their education for those years. So Stephanie, in your experience, are the kids behind? And is that one of the reasons people are coming to this type of school? Schooling is to try to help them kind of make up for that and get back on level.
Yeah, I think as a nation, we're behind. When we're looking at assessments, which homeschoolers have better, data, but when we're looking at assessments, when we're looking across the board at, reading, basic math skills, knowledge of the world in terms of science and social studies, we're behind on all of those things. COVID compounded something that was already happening. And as Tiffany mentioned before, school districts are struggling to keep up with the amount of special needs and special service requests that are coming in. Which is something actually we do, is help families to work with that, advocate, set them up with special service lawyers that can help with things like this, because, it's becoming dire because there are kids that have needs that are behind, and it's all kind of coming together into something that, it needs to be met one way or another. So like, yes, COVID did part of it. And there was part of it building before that for sure. So one great thing about what I was saying about the little things and the fun parts here is that there's a lot of things that like a traditional public school model wasn't touching on. A lot of the things you guys mentioned before, that you don't always have, enough funding. So what gets cut? The fun programs and the special needs programs, right? And this is somewhere where you can build it right back in whatever way you'd like to, and whatever way is going to best meet the needs of your child. So this is actually helping in terms of like, you need to do your core subjects, but we also need to do X, Y, and Z. And now it's up to us to make that happen instead of up to a school district that's lacking in funds.
Yeah. What I hear you saying is do the core subjects, but also develop your special gifts. Yeah.
And your person and your interests.
Yeah. Tiffany, are you seeing people coming to you to try to help their students get caught up?
Yeah, I think, I mean, along with all the great points that Stephanie made, along with assessments and, all things academic, I think mentally and emotionally, COVID took a really big toll on students and on families as well. I think that learning in general is an emotional risk. And if students don't feel comfortable taking that risk, then they're not going to do well in school. So I think that in terms of being able to, getting caught up, like what being behind, like what that really means for a student is, I think it's in some way, their motivation or willingness to continue to move forward has been hindered. And I think COVID had a lot to do with that, because it was sort of like, instantly removing them from an environment that felt safe, school. And then suddenly, COVID lasted a long time, and especially in really formative years for a lot of students. And then suddenly putting them back into an environment where they didn't feel safe. So how can we, how could we bring them, how can we make them feel safe about learning again? And that's what homeschooling does. It sort of eliminates all of the aspects of your day that would hinder you from being able to say, I don't understand this, but I would like to. So how can I make the steps towards doing that? That's what homeschool provides. That's what we're definitely seeing families approach us with, is just sort of like, ever since COVID, I don't know, it's just she's feeling really anxious at school, or but when she's at home and doing it on her own or working one-on-one, she's thriving. So it's not even so much this giant academic gap, but it's just what's happened that's led to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. It's feeling safe learning and then falling in love with learning again. Yeah. Everett, were you impacted, by the COVID years in your schooling, or was it less so because you were already online?
So directly, no, I was never impacted by, like my scholastic career was never impacted by COVID. I just cruised through it. Honestly, I think there was one point I stayed at my home for 90 days and didn't even realize I had never gone out of the house for so long. I will say, I think COVID affected the stigma that surrounds online education. It had already been, especially in the Deep South, it had already been somewhat of a, oh, you're homeschooled, your mom just gives you 100s, like that sort of stigma. And so, especially after COVID, I would say it got worse because everybody was in that forced remote schooling system instead of an online schooling system. And so everybody thought that's what I did. And they're like, how could you stand that? I could not do that. And it made that stigma even stronger. And I think noticing all of that, I'm even more glad I've been at an online school because, for example, at Laurel Springs, I've discovered it's the norm now for eighth grade students and seventh grade students to be taking honors algebra 1, honors geometry, classes that ninth and 10th grade students would be taking. And then I go and look at the brick and mortar school, and there's students in ninth grade still struggling with algebra. And so I'm like, it is proven online schooling systems give us a better education, but so many people are so worried about what people will think about their child that they're instead keeping them in that brick and mortar.
So some of the parents on this call may be facing that stigma that you mentioned, Everett. I had hoped that the stigma was lessened, because everybody homeschooled around the world for the while. But if they had a negative experience with it, am I hearing you say that there was backlash for that, and that people were like, God, why would you want to homeschool again, or why would you want to do online schooling? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. So a lot of times, I think some parts of the world, it definitely probably lessened. I know a lot of our students at Laurel Springs School, we call them like the COVID transfer kids. So they transferred in from COVID and then just never went back. But in certain regions of the world, like I said, especially in the Deep South, but you don't get prom, you don't get football, you don't get to hang out with your friends, you don't get to walk through the halls, you don't get to be dumb and silly in school. And so it's like, why would you ever want to do that? And so that stigma of why would you possibly choose to decide to create that education path for yourself is what I think strengthened after COVID.
As you made me all of you made me think too about the mental health crisis that we are facing with our students. Is this customized education? Could this be an answer for them as well. For this, there's such a high unhappiness rate. There's a high feeling lost rate, very high depression rates right now. So, Stephanie, Tiffany, Everett, do you think that, having some outside support, or maybe just being brave and choosing a different style of education, do you see this helping with mental health, with this crisis?
Yeah, I'd say I have about 75% of our phone calls come in now and start with a parent telling us that their child literally cannot go back in a school building. Their anxiety is too high. They're about to, have a breakdown. They need something. Which is, it's sad that it even gets to that point. And some people choose to go into this as a reset, to just give their kid a break. And, from that route, some of them choose to stick with it, and some choose to use it as an actual break and then, reset and go back into some type of brick and mortar, even if it's not the same from where they, came from. But it's an excellent break. It really is. And sometimes kids just really need to step away from a situation that was making them feel a certain way. And they, the socialization aspect, which is one of the most talked about, which ever just talked about, doesn't need to be a specific way at all. I mean, the majority of the kids we're working with come to us already with things going on in their life that they want to continue. And some of them we set up with more things. You end up connecting with people, with peers, and even your parents connecting with their parents, and building your own new community of like-minded kids that end up helping each other out, leaning on each other, working through things together. They feel comfortable, they feel safe. And then it kind of gives you like a stepping stone after that to decide, where you want to go next. So there is a mental health crisis, 100%. We hear it every day, but this actually does end up being helpful in that sense.
Tiffany, are you finding this to be helpful for your families as well?
Absolutely. I think that parents and students feel a huge sense of relief when they decide to, move forward with homeschooling in whatever capacity it is. Clearly, for what they were doing wasn't working for them before. And I think, and I mean, I think Stephanie put it a really great way. It's like a reset. This decision, number one, doesn't have to be an end all be all. Also, I think for families to know that this is an opportunity for them to just step back, but they can still stay on track with their studies. They can still learn. You still have the freedom. And I think that people also, and like what Everett was saying, I think a lot of people are just, when they think about homeschooling, it's so daunting, right? Like it's this huge decision. What do I even do to start? And as these barriers start to sort of break down, I think that it is can be a huge step for mental health in terms of just like, oh, okay, have a second to breathe. Mm-hmm. I can spend some more time with my family. School these days, there's a lot of pressure on students today, a lot. And I think that when they're given the permission to take a step back and take a mental health break and breathe for a second, I think it takes but also knowing that they're not compromising their education as well gives them a big sense of relief. I think it gives the parents a really big sense of relief. So yes, absolutely. I think that it's a great tool for mental health.
Can I add in quickly? I'm sure you get this too, Tiffany, but when we get off the phone with parents, almost every time we hear those words, I feel so relieved right now. It's almost like they didn't know these things existed until somebody sat down and said, no, this is an actual thing you could do and your kid's going to be fine in terms of being able to transition into something, whatever direction you want to go. And they just need to hear it from a professional, and then they feel relief. So
yeah, 100%.
Everett, you mentioned that you call them kind of COVID students. Does it seem to be a gift for them when they come in?
A lot of times, yes. I would say it has been so many different people always come to me with such positive outtakes on, oh my gosh, this really helped me out. And especially like, I know a lot of the people that stayed ended up being those people that had mental health needs that needed to stay, because it's such a dangerous world now these days to be able to say, for example, if I said I have Asperger's, I'd be treated like a child anywhere. And I'm like, let me do what I can do best. And so many people would just be like, no, stereotypical, this is what we need to do. This is what your education needs to be. And I'm like, clearly not. I'm about to be 15. I'm going off to college, but stereotypically, I shouldn't be able to do that because I have a certain disorder that I should have to rely on people. And so I've always found that to be a struggling point, is where I'm like, I don't need to rely on people. I refuse to take tests with accommodations, even though I'm eligible, just because there's something that personally I don't need. I respect so many people that need them just because that's the direction that they go. That's what they're comfortable with. But for me, I'm able to say, I do not want to use those accommodations because then I feel like personally I'm stereotypicalizing myself into those different categories that people try to put me in. And so I think online education allows somebody to feel safe and secure about their child not getting bullied at school, their child not getting like beaten up at school, because they're at their home, they're safe, they're getting a well-rounded education. Because you can see so many times on social media, especially for autism, if somebody's acting different or weird on social media, they immediately go like, oh, that person's just acting autistic. And it's so demeaning to students. And for them to be in an online place and be able to say, oh, okay, I'm just not going to look at that, whatever. But in a brick and mortar school, they constantly have to face that every single day. So I think so many people are relieved when they start an online school like Little Springs, because they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have to worry about my child getting bullied. I don't have to worry about anything happening to my child. So I think that's really important to people.
And, you know, the effect it makes on their future. You know, my son was Asperger's. I know that's, used to call it Asperger's, and he prefers that phrase. But we just took it 1 year at a time for all of our children for homeschooling. Just 1 year at a time. How is this working for us? Do we want to stay? And for his freshman year, he decided that he wanted to try the public schooling. And he described it as so much busyness for so little learning. And I thought, kind of out of the mouths of babes, you know, so much busyness for so little learning. And one time when he was in PE, he was bullied by the wrestling club. And when I picked him up from school, I guess they had said something and he had teared up, and it did not go well. And I just thought, thank goodness that out of his own choice, he returned to homeschooling, because when he was in his 20s, when he met with counselors, they were surprised at how whole his heart was. They said that most people with Asperger's or on the autism spectrum, that the bullying and the meanness and can be so tough that it really damages them long term. But my son is still beautiful and kind, and I really attribute our online and homeschooling for that he was able to develop his talents. And Everett, I see your mother here in the chat. Hello, Virginia. She said that when you were diagnosed as autistic, and when you joined Laurel Springs, you could not even speak to other students in the beginning, and that Laurel Springs literally taught you how to be social in a way that did not overwhelm you. And you were able to build up your self-confidence to being high while you were in online school. I find that to be a really beautiful testament. Now, Virginia, thank you for sharing that. So we are running into the end of our time together. Are there any other questions coming up? Hi, Nicole.
Hello, hi. Sorry, I was muted.
This is Nicole with Laurel Springs. She's been monitoring the chat for us. Thank you, Nicole.
Yes. And it has been such a wonderful conversation so far. And I am so excited because the conversation continues, because we have some awesome questions. So I'll just get right into it. So what is one message that each of you would give a family who is on the fence of deciding whether homeschooling is the right option for their child?
Okay, repeat that again for us, Nicole. I can tell that it's an excellent question.
Yeah, for sure. What is one message each of you would give to a family who is on the fence deciding if homeschooling is the right option for their child?
Oh, those might end up being perfect closing remarks as well,
Mhm.
just in case. But Everett, would you go first? We'll go in the same order. Everett, Tiffany, and Stephanie. So if a family's on the fence, what's
Um,
the one piece of advice you would give them to help them decide?
that's tough. I would definitely say a piece of advice is, or more of like a directional piece, is you will be giving your child such a better education. It is night and day difference between online and brick and mortar students, and you can clearly tell when out in public how they handle themselves. They speak more academically, they're able to hold conversations with adults and aren't scared of adults. So if you want to prepare your child better for the future, I would 10 out of 10 recommend an online schooling system.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you, Everett. Tiffany.
Sorry. I guess a couple things. I'm going to say two. I have two of them. The first one is I would ask your child how they feel about it. I think that's a huge part of this is asking them if they would like to be homeschooled and why. And get that first. Second of all, I think that homeschooling, just to sort of go along with Everett's theme, shapes a very independent thinker. And I think if you sort of think about what type of life that you would like your child to have and what access they'll have to things if they choose to the homeschooling route, then that will help you decide whether or not this is going to be a good fit for them.
Oh, I really like that. Words are powerful. If the child, I don't want to use the word child, but if the student doesn't like the word homeschool, call it online schooling. And I love the way you approach that. Ask them, are you interested in online schooling? It looks like you'll be able to do this, this, and this, and this. I trust them. When my son was 8th grade, I took him to all the different kinds of schools we had in our neighborhood. I took him to the public school, the Catholic school, the Waldorf school, the Montessori school, and he decided that he wanted to stay in homeschooling. And that decision, him getting to make that decision, made all the difference in the world. I never had to nag him about his studies after that because he got behind his choice. He made that choice, and I really like the trust in that. Thank you, Tiffany. So, Stephanie, what about you? If someone's on the fence?
You guys have done so well that I'm going to veer in the other direction and talk about the legality of it. I have parents often that are nervous and, but what if did we miss the boat here? Nope, there's no boat. You want me to help you withdraw tomorrow? We'll do it. What if they don't like it? What if it doesn't work? Then we'll try something else. What if they have to go back to school? I'll put them back in school. There's this pressure that you're making a wrong decision and you're going to like mess up the future in some way. And, one thing we're constantly explaining to parents is if you're on the fence, if you feel in your gut, this might be a good way to go, give it a shot. There's, what's the harm in trying something that could be beneficial? If you need to reverse it or if we need to change course, it's not great to move around a bunch of times, but if this is something that, you think you want to do, we'll do it. If it's something you need to change course and revert back, we'll do that. So having that pressure lifted about the preciseness of dates or when do I have to do this is sometimes very helpful in making the decision.
I really like that too. And especially if you think you're only going to be online schooling or homeschooling for a year, think about your reentry. Find out what books should have been read, customize your curriculum to make that reentry easier.
We call it seamless transitioning.
I love the seamless transition. Yeah, that's great. Nicole, any other great questions? These are really good.
Yes. We have another question for Everett. How has being a part of online school, how has it helped you explore your interests or passions more deeply?
I think it let me explore my interests by not debilitating what I was able to do. There was no walls that I had to break down. There was no doors I had to walk through. I was just able to go, oh, I want to go try that. I remember at one point I was 7 or 8 And I decided I want to go try the Memphis Rocket Club. So me and my dad went to Hobby Lobby, bought a kit, and put some chemicals in the thing. Went to the club and shot the thing into the sky. And like it just allows me to pursue my interests in such ways like that. For example, last year during my junior year at Laurel Springs, I took a concepts of engineering class, and the final project, because we all love final projects, it was design something using the engineering method, and that was all it was. There was nothing else, and I could design it digitally or physically. I went with digitally just for time's sake and stuff. And I was able to use a simulation to design and test a rocket that I had built, and was able to actually use this rocket and stuff to land it on the moon in the physical simulation or in the virtual simulation. And this simulation used real life based calculus physics. So it was all very real how I built this rocket. And it slapped me in the face for how amazing that form of education was. It was, hey, go use the math and science you've learned, plus the design skills you've learned in this class, and go build me something. And I met with so many different people. Some people built like phone charger rollers that kept the phone charger not twisting and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need one of those. And so many different projects. It was just insane to see the variety of students that were building in my class.
So, Everett, you're kind of giving us the impression that only smart people, right, do online school, because you're representing it pretty impressively. So, but in your experience, and I'll put this to the whole panel, does this online schooling, can regular kids have good results? Can they have the type of experiences that Everett has been inspiring us with if they're just regular IQ kids? Stephanie and Tiffany, what's your experience with that?
So I have a lot of experience inside school buildings and districts. And I want to give you guys a scenario, okay? Say you have a middle ground reader, 3rd grade, right? And they're in a classroom with somewhere between 25 and 35 other kids. You can guarantee that they're not the ones getting the special help. And there also probably isn't enough time to sit with them and work with their skill set to see their areas of strength and build those, and see their areas where they need to grow and give them enough individualized attention. You take that same student and you put them in a homeschooling scenario and give them all those little things we talked about to build their mental health, their character, their socialization. And then when you talk about the academic side, those 25 to 35 kids disappear, and you can see precisely where your child is strong and can be pushed, and where they're struggling and what to do about it, and spend as much time as you need to. We call it fast as you can, but slow as you must, because that's something you could do when there's when there's your own kids sitting with you, or even a small group of kids.
Tiffany, any thoughts for you?
Yeah, I could just add quickly to go along with that you do not have to spend the same amount of time on every subject. And so what it does, just to really echo what Stephanie was saying, is it really does allow you to figure out, what are your strengths, and what are the other things that you can build on. We also believe in focusing on your strengths, but working through your weaknesses. Sometimes in regular school, you'll spend so much time on your weaknesses, and then you neglect your strengths. When really not everything has to be all equal. You don't have to be just as good as math as you are in English. You can excel. It's okay to excel in English and not be so good in math, or vice versa. That's an okay thing to also develop that. So it allows you to find out what that is, and then, really carve out what your identity is as a student.
Yeah, I love that. You're right, because sometimes it's the middle of the road that loses out because they're not the squeaky wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is so good. Hey, Nicole, I'm looking at the clock, and it's time for us to kind of wrap things up. And I do want to tell people a little bit about next month's panel. Are there any questions in there that we don't want to miss, or are we okay to move on?
Yeah, so we just have one last quick question actually for you, Rebecca. So you shared early on in the panel that you have worked with Laurel Springs for years. What does a successful partnership between an online school and a family look like? And why has Laurel Springs stood out for you among all the other online programs?
Yeah, eclectic homeschooling is the most popular style of homeschooling. And what that means is a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so as the, CEO and founder of homeschool.com, my children used every type of curriculum out there. And one of the things I really liked about Laurel Springs was, for example, learning styles. In other words, they teach us in the very beginning that remember that you tend to teach to your own learning style. So I am auditory, so I just want to talk, 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 talk. And yet, but I have two girls who are visual, and I have a son who is auditory. We were in sync, but with my girls, we were not. And I really like the respect behind that. I also really like how Laurel Springs is about this high standards, but it's customized, and about developing the strengths. We've been talking about that. Oh my gosh, I want this for every student in the world. I want them. I recognize that we work at different levels at different subjects. And I love what Stephanie was saying. It's like develop your strengths, but go ahead and bring those other things up too. And they're taking care of both of them. And they do that so respectfully. And I think it is also, instead of just cramming curriculum down someone's throat, it's a co-creative process. Which I think of as like collective intelligence. We're going to see more of that in the future, bringing collective intelligence together and listening to the kids. What's your number one goal? And then you help them achieve that. And then it's such a confidence builder. What are you interested in? Rockets? Let's go take time for that. My son was all about boats. And when I took his dream seriously, and we went and found a boating class, he thought, oh, my dreams matter. So I love all of that about Laurel Springs. I wish that everybody could do it. And I did see that during COVID, those Laurel Springs kids, they're not behind. And I can see why. I feel like they're very lucky to be able to do that. I wish that everybody could. They really are the gold standard. I like Abeka. I like everything that everybody talked about, but I do consider Laurel Springs to be the gold standards. Yeah, there's a reason Laurel Springs is winning all these awards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. This has been so wonderful. I love learning with you. It was so interesting, don't you think? Didn't we learn a lot? Mm-hmm. And I found where we're kind of coordinated, but also some fresh ideas. This has been such a pleasure. Next month, the topic is going to be future-proofing education. Future-proofing education. Oh, I love this topic. And that's what we were talking about here, about these kids doing so well, mental health, interest, confidence, feeling safe. That is kind of future-proofing their life. All the things we were talking about here, whether we label it as homeschooling or online learning or customized education, we're ahead of the game. I've always believed that online learning and homeschooling has been kind of modeling the future for us in the present tense. So everyone, whether you're listening to the recording here today or on the call today, I hope that you can join the panel next month. Future-proofing educations. And it's like how you're going to prep students for a world that is unpredictable. And I do like that word, unpredictable, because it feels like the ground is a little shaky. And just like it's faster to turn a car in a U-turn than it is a Mack truck, kind of the brick and mortar schools, it's that Mack truck. It's harder for them to make changes. But when you're an online school and you're a homeschool, it's easier for you to make that change because you're smaller. So as I said, I wish that everybody could do it. I'm very excited to watch the panel next week and to hear what everyone has to say. So this is great. So final, Tiffany, Stephanie, Everett, final one sentence, everyone. Say goodbye and your final piece of encouragement, please. Tiffany. Mute.
I'm so
Everyone
sorry.
unmute.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone. And of course, always you can reach out if you have questions. And homeschooling is such a great option, and I think that it is easy to get started. So don't feel like there's a huge barrier to entry for it, because there isn't. So if it's something that you want to try, I would really, really just encourage families to give it a shot, because I think it can bring a lot more than you expect it to.
And if our audience wants to connect with you, they can go to noveleducationgroup.com. NOVEL educationgroup.com. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Stephanie, final sentence, no
Yes.
pressure.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. I love talking about this. And one reason, I'm sure you'll share the website, but we do free consultations, as I'm sure, Tiffany knows too, because sometimes people just need to talk through their situation and find the options and hear them. So do that. This is a lot more doable than people think it is. It's nerve-wracking in the beginning, and then it becomes so much more routine and fun, and something you look back at like, wow, I was so scared in the beginning. So just jumping in and giving it a shot, or hearing how this could work for you is a big step.
That's excellent. Yes, so people can connect with you at myhomeschoolexpert.com. myhomeschoolexpert.com. Everett, you're a minor. I don't want to give out your information, but people are sending congratulations to you, and they're sending you well wishes on going off to school. Is there a way that is kind of safe for people to email you, like through Laurel Springs or something like that? And Virginia, your mom, how would you like people to connect with Everett? Because I can imagine he would be such a wonderful mentor. Everett, do you have a feel for this, Everett?
As a student, there are multiple different ways. I think one of the best ways would be to do it is to reach out to Laurel Springs, so either Miss Fremont or a Laurel Springs guidance counselor. I just got recently accepted into the Alumni Ambassador program at Laurel Springs. So even after I graduate, I still will be in touch with Laurel Springs faculty. And I know a lot of times if students have questions about dual enrollment at a specific university that I've attended, a lot of times the counselors will connect them to me. So if anybody wants to connect via that way, I always do Zoom calls and emails about just talking about how to go through it, because it's a difficult process. And piggybacking off of what you said, you don't have to be smart to do this. My test scores are very average. I don't have high test scores or anything. It's just Laurel Springs enables you to sound so good because of all the opportunities given. So yes, reaching out through Laurel Springs would be great. Yes.
Okay, I see an address for that. The marketing team said that we can go through LSS for Laurel Springs School, marketing group at laurelsprings.com. So if anyone has any questions, or if you want to reach the panelists, and particularly Everett, LSS marketing group at laurelsprings.com. This has been really good. Yeah, I'm so glad that we are doing this. I hope that we can make a difference for people. When you're thinking about going countercultural and everyone else is going off to a regular public school for the most part, or they're going to a brick and mortar, and it can feel scary to do something that's different. And it's almost like passing through a curtain. In the beginning, you just see the curtain, but then when you pass through it, you realize there's a world of resources. There's a world of socialization opportunities. It's so much easier than you think it is. It's just kind of scary in the beginning because it is different. But I sure would encourage people to give it a try. I think all of us on this panel, we would say, especially if you have a child or a student who really wants it, try to figure out how to make that possible, remembering that you can always re-enter. And, listening to them, there's a lot of stuff going out there in the world that we don't necessarily know all about. But, listening to our kids, and if they have this major rocket of desire, take a look at it and reach out to Laurel Springs School too, and set up an appointment with them and see is a good fit with you. And there are lots of fabulous options out there, but of course, Laurel Springs is one of my favorites. Okay, yes, they can always email Laurel Springs and they can help facilitate it. All right, everyone. Big wave. Thank you for being with us on the recording. Thank you for being on the live call. Stephanie, Everett, Tiffany, such a pleasure spending time with you. Thank you for your generous time and sharing your wisdom. And thank you again to Laurel Springs School for hosting this event for us. So appreciative. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Bye.